Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome again to our program, the debate on the Sompon Global TV. Today is on the 25th edition of our program, and the topic for today is Ubuntu, the African shared value. And our question for today is, how can strengthening a common African position make the continent more visible in the global arena? How can strengthening a common African position make the continent more visible in the global arena? That's the topic we'll be ending the program today, 25th edition, and this will be the last topic for the year 2020. Today with me in the studio, I have Mr. George Mofor and Dr. Jane Ayeko Kumet. I hope I had the name correctly. And I remain your humble host, Mbolifor Elvis Mbolifor. Before I introduce our host to you, today we're looking at Ubuntu. Let me give you a brief review before we are going to have an insight from Doctor, who will be taking 10 minutes to talk about Ubuntu, to talk about the shared African value, to talk about strengthening a common position that will make the continent more visible in the global arena. And when we talk of Ubuntu, it is an African philosophy that places emphasis on being served through others. I insist, it places emphasis on being served through others. It is therefore a form of humanism which can be expressed simply as I am because of who we all are. I am because of who we all are. Ubuntu therefore carries fairly broad definitions of equality that include the essential human virtues of compassion and humanity. And some values of Ubuntu you may want to know. Ubuntu philosophy articulates on important values of respect, human dignity, compassion, solidarity, and consensus, which demands conformity and loyalty to the group. However, modern African society is constituted of people from different cultures and backgrounds. And I end with this few words which were written by Desmond Tutu in his book No Future Without Forgiveness in 1999. And he says, we are different so that we know our need of one another. For one, for no one is ultimately self-sufficient. The complete self-sufficient person, therefore, would be a subhuman. That is how Desmond Tutu put it. Ubuntu, the African philosophy, which bases on humanism. That is a nutshell of what we are going to be looking for at this evening, an African value which is peculiar to African people. And I want to welcome today my two panelists who are new on the panel. We have always had people who come and come and come. And today we are honored to have Mr. Mufo George and Dr. Jane Ayeku, who are going to be closing the debate for this year. We are so honored to have you. I begin with Mr. Mufo, who will introduce himself, say a bit about himself, then Doctor will take over and then get into her 10 minutes of an overview of the topic. Mr. Mufo, you are heartily welcome to the program, The Debate.
Thank you very much. Like you just said, and my name is Mofo George. Essentially, my father gave me those names, but professionally, I am a consultant. I used to work with the Pan African Institute for Development, West Africa, which is a diplomatic training institution based in Boya as headquarters. Boya is a town in southwestern region of Cameroon. I actually is also my alma mater. After being trained there, I went to higher studies. Essentially, I read sociology and anthropology at the right up to the postgraduate level in an all English university, what is called an Anglo-Saxon university, that's University of Boya. and the University of Douala, which is also supposed to be a bilingual university, but essentially it is conceived in the francophone or French-inspired educational system. So, besides those formal academic endeavors, I have also participated in a lot of other capacity building activities. Uh, I have a passion on vocational training, especially vis-a-vis the issue of addressing youth unemployment. And I currently run what they call short professional short courses in partnership with the a private higher institution in Cameroon called the Catholic University Institute of Boya. I think in the brief, that is me for now. And I want to
Thank,
also bring one other element that I've been a member of an organization they call Junior Chamber International after serving it for more than 20 years and after 40 where you are no more eligible to be a member that could be elected or stand for election, you are given a life membership of a senator. So I'm a senator with Junior Chamber International, which is also based in the United States of America and found in about 120 countries in the world. It brings together young persons between the ages of 18 and 40 years.
thank you so much, Mr. Mofo. Quite an interesting curriculum there. Pan African Institute for Development, passion for vocational training, addressing youth unemployment. Sorry, you work equally with the Catholic University, and you intervene with the Junior Chamber International, where now you are a senator with the Junior Chamber International. A square peg in a square hole. You're so welcome to the platform. Thank you so much, Doctor.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this very interesting topic. My name is, as you rightly said, Jane Ayeko Kumet. I am a political scientist and I'm also a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Bayreuth here in Bavaria, Germany. As a political scientist, my area of specialty or interest is studying or analyzing the political economy of Africa. That's basically where my expertise is. And I've been living in this country for over 10 years, and I call myself a proud African diaspora. And that's why I find myself in this platform today to discuss the topic that you have already introduced, Ubuntu. I find it quite interesting, and certainly, as we will see along way, something that concerns all of us as Africans, particularly us, the diaspora, who are trying to see how much we can contribute towards the development of the continent from afar, even if it's just virtually as we are doing now. Now, to start with, let's look at what the continent is like. Africa is certainly a vast continent with, with a diversity of cultures. This is our topic today. We're trying to look at culture. And important to start with is Africa is a vast continent with diversity of cultures. Now, what is important for the continent is that rather than looking at this as an impediment to development, it is important for the continent to look at this and take it and treat it as an advantage. Use its rich cultural diversity in the quest for development, because we can nurture culture, we can make the best use out of it. For many people, both scholars and theorists have believed that culture is the starting point of humanity. Culture is the cradle of where we are, where we get what makes us who we are. And in that context, I think that if the continent focuses on changing attitude, people's attitudes, which are drawn from a cultural perspective towards respect, as you already highlighted, towards respect and among respect of each other, building trust among each other, then we are on the right track, especially when we build interpersonal trust, which also will lead or contribute towards trust in our governments and our government institutions. Now, to draw on the concept, to take on from where you already started, the concept of Ubuntu, I pick on some things that you said. What do we really understand from this? You already said it, and you already tried to give us an English translation of what Ubuntu means. For me, I like to look at it and say it's basically being there for others. That is the beginning. That's the cradle of humanity. Ubuntu is all about being there for others. It's all about doing good for the benefit of the entire community. And if you translate this to individuals or to our leaders in the continent, then I would like to say that Ubuntu is about not feeling threatened by other peoples, because after all, the whole concept is you belong to. It's about belonging to the other party, belonging to the other group of people. It is a concept that doesn't look at differences in humanity, but rather attempts to bring humans together. Now, to relate this context to the African Union's Agenda 2063, aspiration number 5, which is basically about an Africa with a strong cultural identity and common heritage and shared values and ethics, I think that this choice of discussing Ubuntu and how it can be used to move the continent forward fits in very well. Why? Because the aspiration number 5 is founded on the basics or looks forward to Pan-Africanism and the common history of identity and destiny and heritage and respect for religious diversity and the consciousness of African people. That's the way it is framed, and these are some of the things that the aspiration number 5 tries to look at. When we relate this to Ubuntu, then I would like us to look at and try to analyze what are the implications of this? How does this fit in within this? How much is the extent, or are our leaders ready or moving forward to seeing that we are going to harness our cultural identity, our cultural diversity, our cultural heritage in order to move the continent forward? And when we talked about the attributes of Ubuntu and we try to relate it to the current situation of the continent, then the implication would mean that if we come up with a common cultural heritage, of course, bearing in mind that the whole continent, I've already talked about its diversity, we cannot claim to come of a common culture. We can't come out with a common culture for Africa. We can't claim to have something called African culture. But what we want to agree here is that with our diversity, with our heritage, our differences, that is the very uniqueness that we should look at from a perspective of pride, from a perspective of advantage, and use it to and harness it to take us a step forward, which will then imply that if we are talking about Africanization, then we are going to say Africanization of politics and society would mean a greater sense of communalism and socialism. And all this kind of thing, or this move, is rather founded or based on what we look at as our cultural values, what we look at as our heritage. By so harnessing our culture, we are going to be talking along this debate probably to talk about things like what makes Africa unique in terms of its culture. We talk about art and culture. We talk about music. We talk about the growing film industry. How can we bring all these aspects of our culture together and harness it, in addition to different aspects that the continent is looking at as aspects that are going to move the continent forward? Now, what is the visibility of all this? Going back to the starting point, where the moderator, of course, highlighted the wholeness or the beauty of this Ubuntu in Africa, because many of us, when we hear the word Ubuntu, will probably associated to South Africa because it kind of got popularized by the late first South African Black president Nelson Mandela, rest in eternal peace. But if you look at Africa, if you study the culture of Africa, this is a concept or a practice that cuts across in different names. This is something that cuts across, and perhaps that is where the African Union bases its aspiration, because this is something that cuts across, and we can treat it as a common culture, the uniqueness of the African people, which on the other hand, I think extends to all humanity. It's the cradle of humanity. Everybody has something, or we are all created in that human nature of respecting each other, of treating people just like humans. To get to the current situation of the continent where we see a challenge, we need to draw back to say, if this Ubuntu concept was cutting across, where did it fall apart? Because if we had stuck to it, probably the continent would have moved far ahead, away from where we are today. And if we still had leaders who are grounded on the principles of Ubuntu, then this would be leaders who are selfless, who are ready to consult the people that they lead, and not who are ready to listen to them, and not kind of leaders who are going to adopt different lifestyles and lifestyles that are different from their subjects, not the kind of leaders who are going to transform themselves to some sort of goddess. And we will, if we draw on the concept as a continent, then we can think of, a starting point of where did we fall, where did we go wrong? Can we talk about reconciliation? Can we talk about togetherness? Can we talk about unity? And what will happen then is we would have leaders who are coming into power and not looking at what did my predecessor do, who went wrong where, and I can carry on those. The problem we have now is that the whole continent seems to have fallen apart from Ubuntuism, so to say. And what we are seeing now is that each successive leader in the different countries in the continent seem to be practicing the kind of politics of favor, kind of ethnicity, politics based on favor, politics based on ethnicity, politics based on loyalty, not to go into the details of nepotism and the like, and the kind of politics that only serves the people who belong to their ideology. So in other words, the principles of caring for each other, the principles of Ubuntu have been put aside. They're not being promoted. Instead, the leaders become selective in their service delivery. They end up serving or rendering services based on that, what I have just indicated. Services are rendered along the lines of religion, ethnicity, where do I come from, what did the previous leader do, how did he treat my people from my ethnic group or people from my religion, how did he, and then the next leader follows into that and tries to kind of practice politics of revenge, politics of redistribution. And for as long as we continue having such leaders who are moving the country like that, then we are working against each other. Then we are not moving further. But if we come back as the aspiration looks at, and we work towards Pan-Africanism, we work towards reconciling, reviving, rejuvenating the Ubuntuism in our continent, then I see that this is something that we can harness to take us forward. So from my perspective, I think that the way forward would be for the continent to look at, for the continent leaders not to look at identities, but rather look at what is this that brought us together. We belong together. We are different in one way or another. We can never be the same person, but at the end of the day, let's acknowledge humanity as it is. And when we acknowledge humanity as it is, then we are going to see leaders who are working towards unification of society rather than social stratification, social divisions, where you have different classes within the same country, within the same state, within the same continent. And by embracing the principles of Ubuntu, we are going to see a unified country, a people that are not fighting themselves within, we are going to avoid internal conflicts or ethnic conflicts in countries, but at the same time, we are going to see an extension of, an end towards cross-border countries. And if we have this, then we are moving towards stability. And once we establish stability, then we can look forward to attracting investors to the continent, because every investor wants to look at a country that enjoys stability, but also that offers a lot. So if we have this kind of Ubuntuism in us, then we are also going to encourage local investors to move from one part of the country to another, to move from one part of the continent to another freely as one person, one people who are working together and moving the continent forward, especially in this era where we are talking about domestic-led development, development from within. And we see that development from within is what led to the development of countries like Japan or other Asian countries. For now, I think that the way forward is really for the continent to come back and revive the Ubuntuism that our ancestors started with. And I would like to stop at that for now, and we shall carry on the debate forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful submission. We are honored to have you, and you say that Africa is a vast continent with diverse cultures, and that we should use this diversity to our advantage and not instead to our disadvantage, and that we have common cultural heritage, Ubuntu cutting across Africa. And remember that we are looking at aspiration 5 of the Agenda 2063 today, and that Ubuntu is the cradle of humanity. And the question we're asking ourselves is, where did Ubuntu fall apart? And I'm coming back to you with this question. And you say, how can we bring back the spirit of Ubuntu? These are the aspects that we're going to be looking into in this our debate. And you conclude by saying that if we embrace Ubuntu, we will fight or we will not fight against ourselves. We will experience development. There will be no conflicts, and we are going to stabilize or establish a stability as well as attract investors. And that is actually what Africa needs. That is what we need to make our country what we want it to be. Thank you so much, Doctor, for that wonderful presentation. And to come back to in line with your presentation, we are said or we are told that Ubuntu, I am because you are. And when we talk of I am because you are, we're looking at sharing of space, culture, experiences, growth, successes, as well as failures. I want to ask you this question, Doctor. What must have derailed Africa from these values of Ubuntu? It is really a serious problem. We fight amongst ourselves. We can talk about side xenophobia in South Africa. We can talk about NSAS, where citizens fighting against themselves, the military fighting the citizens. So, what actually has derailed Africa from this value of humanism?
I think it really goes back to the political trajectory of Africa. If we have to understand the current state of Africa, we do not want to run away from our history. We to understand where did we fall apart, where did things fall apart. I think we cannot deny the history, the colonial history of Africa. But at the same time, I'm careful not to say that we cannot also continue to blame colonialism for the problems that beset the continent. We cannot continue to talk about colonialism and not move forward. But just to give it a historical background, or the starting point was, you and me who understand the colonial history of the continent will know that what the colonial masters did to the continent was divide and rule and classify societies and create and come up with the whole idea of ethnicity, which was something not known to the continent, so to say. We lived as a people, as one people, and we didn't look at ourselves from ethnic perspective. So you are so, you are so, you behave like this, you look like this. We basically were a people that were united in our Ubuntuism. What happened is that for it was an easy pathway for the colonialists to penetrate the continent. So what they did was to divide the continent into these ethnic groups and created who is superior than the other, depending on, as the nature of humanity would be, who was easy to form alliance with. What happened is that after colonialism, the post-colonial rulers, our first independence rulers, did not establish institutions that were able to move the continent forward. What happened is that they basically took on these institutions and ruled using the colonial institutions and followed the same methods that the colonialists used. They used ethnicity to form political mileage. So they continued, other than bringing the continent together, the different ethnic groups in specific countries together, they continued to ride on this. And as time went on, as I already said, every respective leader that came to power rode on the same principles, adjusted here and there, but they basically continued practicing ethnicity. The moment we started identifying ourselves as ethnic groups, then known as tribes, which is politically wrong and academically wrong today, that is the time where we fell apart. And of course, the issue of religion also came in. So my whole understanding is the moment we accepted everything foreign and used it against ourselves, then we fell apart. Then our Ubuntuism fell apart, because then we are fighting religious wars which were not our religions in the first place. We are fighting for resources, we are fighting for this, we've adapted, it's good to be modern, it's good to be progressive, but we are adapting all these concepts of life which do not fit in our continent, and we are adapting them wholeheartedly. Perhaps we should adapt these different ways of life with cautiousness and try to adapt them and contextualize them within the African context, and then we can move on. But if we adapt everything that is coming from the global south or from the Arab world in the context of religion, without trying to see how it fits within the African continent, we shall continue living in division, and for as long as we are divided, we don't see the continent moving forward.
Thank you so much for enlightening us again on where we fell apart with our Ubuntuism, as you put it. You say colonialism divided us, and that after colonialism, those who came did not establish institutions to move forward while conserving our Ubuntu spirit. So we are basing and looking particularly at religion and colonialism that actually has torn us apart, has drifted us from love for one another, has drifted us from humanism or humanity, and now we are where we find ourselves fighting ourselves, killing ourselves for reasons that we actually do not know. Thank you so much, Doctor, for being there. And I was tempted to ask again if actually the spirit of Ubuntuism still, or the principle or philosophy of Ubuntu still exists actually in our society. I think you'll be answering that as we are going ahead. And uh, I want to take you, since you are a political analyst, you understand political situations so well. I want to ask you this question. uh, which are the priority areas where Africa can adopt a common position on its development? We have torn ourselves apart. Where are those areas that if all of Africa came together as one, we will actually find development in our own continent, in our Africa?
Well, what are we talking about here? We are talking about Africa of tomorrow. So basically, we are trying to address how to move the continent forward. And for me, moving forward means the future. And when we talk about the future, what are we focusing on? I think that the focus would be on the young generation. We need to invest more in our youth. And like I said, if we, the elders, have already failed in our Ubuntuism, maybe the starting point would be to invest in the young people who are going to be the future leaders of the continent, who are going to move the continent forward. Because if we start by teaching the young people the concept of Ubuntuism again today, it's not too late. It's not too late. It's not a hopeless situation. we see that there is a starting point. And of course, it's even encouraging to see that the African Union, is putting this forth as the fifth aspiration, which means there is already been recognition that we need to go back to our humanity, to the essence of our being. And now if we take it even a step further and say, let's invest in the young people, in education of the young people, in establishing institutions that foster and promote the interests of the young people and teaching them our culture. Let's see that the concept of culture is part and parcel of the young people's upbringing. Then I think we are moving forward. The thing is that I already said we were in a rush to adapt everything from the global north. When you talk about African culture and the way of life in the ancient days, we talk about our art, we talk about our songs, the music, the film, all the things that surrounded culture were meant to educate and nurture children, to bringing them, nurturing them as upright people. What did we do? At a certain point, the continent seemed to have lost. Everything African was seen from a negative perspective. So we adapted, contemporary music that was not adding value to the people. Instead, we were enjoying the entertainment, but it was not adding value. It was not educating the young people. The kind of films that we're producing, that we're watching, were all, global north oriented. So that one contributed to a loss of understanding of our own identity, of our values. But if we invest in the young people now in all aspects, then I think we are able to revive our Ubuntuism, and then we shall talk about further economic progress and development in the continent. But the focus here is the point here is let's focus on the young people throughout the continent, because these are the people who are moving the continent forward. Even today, even if you carried on this discussion, even if you analyzed the current progress, the current development, the transformation that is taking place in the continent at the moment is being steered by the young people. So it only makes sense to invest more in the young brains.
Thank you so much. You talked about investing in our youth so that they can move our continent forward, start teaching our youth the spirit of Ubuntu, and equally educate the youth as well as make them to consume Africa. And we are talking here about our films, our songs, our music, and why not our cultural regalia. I remember we had one topic here where we're looking at Consume Africa, where we saw that most diaspora, when they have to come to Africa, they buy everything from Africa, food, dresses, everything, as if there is nothing in Africa, and they carry heavy boxes back to Africa as if they were coming to a desert, a land where nothing good is found. And so I am so impressed when you insist on consume Africa and teach our youth actually so that they will move the continent further. But then, Doctor, we are already on this journey of Agenda 2063 for quite a while now, 7 years gone already. And you discover that most of our youths are not even aware that it's an agenda that seeks to make life better for them. This agenda is our agenda, cut and shaped for us Africans. A word for the youths concerning this Agenda 2063, because you have talked about educating them, investing in the youth, and helping them to consume Africa. What can you tell them? Because this agenda is actually theirs, and you just made mention of something like that in your presentation.
In my opinion, it takes two to tango. We need the youth involvement there, but we also need the initiative from our leaders, from the old people. When I talk about leaders, I'm not just talking about political leaders, but I'm talking about you and me, who have a better understanding of the continent, a better understanding of our cultural values. Because the youth today are living in a global world, and I don't mean to say that they should they should deny everything that is happening in the international community and go back to concentrate on African affairs or African culture. The point here is that it takes two to tango. You and me and everybody else should play their part in informing the youth, in repackaging the history of Africa, repackaging information about Africa to make it more attractive to the youth wherever they are, including the diaspora youth, because they really don't have much attachment, they don't have much understanding. But if we package this information in the way that they are able to understand, so we can bring them up in a manner that enables them to understand both the African way of life as well as the other part of life in the different parts of the world that they find themselves to. Perhaps it goes to the different governments within the continent to initiate youth programs, to focus more, to have youth ministries that are funded, and not just funded for the sake of funding the politicians therein, but funding them for the sake of driving the youth agenda, the youth interest, because we need to invest in the youth for the future of the continent.
Thank you. In your very preliminary submission, you said that you're a proud African and you live in the diaspora. I wish to, if you could do us a comparative presentation about this spirit of Ubuntu in Africa. You have experienced Africa, you have already experienced the diaspora. How, when you place them on a scale, where is it, or where does it weigh much? Is it in Africa or is it in the diaspora?
I didn't quite get your question. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, I'm asking, I want to know if the spirit of Ubuntu is more prevalent among Africans or more prevalent amongst the Western world. Let me say the Western world because, like you said, you are a proud African. You're surely just living there and you're planning to always come back home to enjoy the spirit of togetherness, the spirit of oneness, and the spirit of humanism.
Well, I wouldn't want to judge or to measure that Ubuntuism is more pronounced in Africa or it's more pronounced in Europe or US or whichever part of the world. Like I said at the very beginning, that Ubuntuism is basically the cradle of humanity. But we also have to acknowledge that society is not static. Society is always transforming. The difference is that society transforms at different levels, at different rates, at different speed in the different parts of the world. So whereas you might want to look at it as something that is not so much acknowledged in the global north, and probably still much prevalent in our own continent. But I already raised eyebrows that if we are not careful, this is something that is also losing its value in our own continent. But we need to acknowledge that this Ubuntuism, as I said, cradle of humanity, is practiced in every part of the world. Let's take an example of Germany here, where we are today. We saw with the advent of the refugee crisis here. I personally saw how much the Germans, who for a long time, many of us had a different perception of a non-friendly community, of maybe very individualistic, just like most of the Western world. But with this advent of refugees, it was for me actually an exposure that humans are the same wherever you go. People came out to help others in different ways. My husband was so much involved in it and is still involved in helping these, including a lot of people here in our community. So it takes different approaches. Here it could take that way. When you talk about donations for supporting the cause of humanity in different parts of the world, this is Ubuntuism in another perspective. Back home, it's also practiced in a different way. You and me who are here, we continue sending remittances back home to educate our siblings, to educate our parents, our relatives, to help people in different needs. This is still the spirit of Ubuntuism because it's about caring for one another. So in essence, it is still there. The spirit is there. It's just that it's not as strong as it used to be. And this is something that we need to revive. But we also, sorry, I have to why now? We also have to be mindful when we are reviving this to continue coping and bearing in mind the context of society that we are living in now. We don't want to exaggerate Ubuntuism or caring for others to the point that it becomes negative, that the people we support relax. and not work hard, because after all somebody else is caring for me. It's about the whole spirit is you are there for the community, and the community is there for you. So we all have to work. We don't want to take it to say we want Ubuntuism so that people care for me and then I don't do anything. It's about mutual contribution for the good of society.
All right, you end with mutual contribution for the good of society, and that humans are all the same, and that no one is self-sufficient. Thank you so much, Doctor, for being there for this debate. We are actually honored that you are closing the debate for 2020, and you are just a resource person. Thank you so much. Before I come even to your specialty uh, about diaspora, I just want to inquire from you, Doctor. Is it possible with this spirit of Ubuntu that if all the African heads of states could adopt a common position, will this grant them a seat in the AU Security Council?
Oh, yeah, I certainly believe in that, because if you look at institutions like the European Union or the different regional institutions, it's only when you have a common voice can you argue as a united fraternity, a united corporate body. The challenge we have now is that even within the continent, we fail to agree among ourselves. Take an example of the free trade pact that was signed, and we had President Kagame trying to foster it. But then we have countries falling apart here and there. Today we are together, tomorrow we are different. So I really think that if the continent leaders come together, they will even make the job of the African Union easier, because the African Union is there as a body trying to fight for the continent, but in the end, the different states want to remain individualistic. So you find that our relations with the rest of the world are based on individual countries. We cannot come to the continent as a continent because we have differences, we have different interests. But until we reach a point where we feel like we are now strong enough to bargain on our own, which is really a rare occurrence, I think it's important that the continent leaders, the different countries, come together and have something in common, so that when they can present themselves among the international community and bargain as one voice, not as Uganda, Cameroon, or Rwanda, or Senegal, but as Africa. And only then, with this one strong voice, then in terms of governance, then you can begin to say we have our common value. This is what we look at strongly, and this is what we adhere to. Then you can support that. You can argue to support that vis-a-vis, against what you don't want. But if you're individual, then you cannot continue condemning what comes from the other side of the world, to say this democracy doesn't apply to us, we don't believe in this, but you don't have your own common position. You need to first establish a common position, and then you can use that as an argument against the other argument which you don't like. That's the way I look at it.
Okay, I was just talking about the diaspora, and I said that the diaspora, when they are coming to Africa, they buy everything, even water that they would drink in Africa for their whole stay. They carry a box of water or boxes filled with water, like they don't just want to consume Africa. And many people think that diasporans are having a conservative spirit. They don't want anything African. They don't want to consume Africa.
And well,
Do you?
I don't think so. I think if you talk about the diaspora, then you probably need to define what you mean by the diaspora. I would rather look at it from an individualistic way. We need to understand, who are we talking about? Who are these people who are behaving like that? Like I said, to some extent, we failed in our role as elders, we failed in our role as parents, but maybe we didn't fail that much. We also, humanity is different in one way or another. People are different. There are people who like certain way of life, but we also don't want to deny the fact that the young people at a certain age in life just like to show off. It's not that they don't believe or they don't value or acknowledge the beauty and the abundance of resources in the continent. It's just young people sometimes who they want to be flamboyant, they want to be it's not something we should take seriously. These kind of people are there in every society in the world. That's not something to worry about. The same people will do that, but when they come back here, they again carry too many things to bring back here. I think it's just a stage in life and it will pass. It's not something we should focus on. We have people who love the continent. We have people who admire the continent and are ready to speak for the continent and to fight for the continent.
In light of what can a strong united diaspora actually impact Africa in this global in the global arena?
Oh
Can they
yes,
have a
of course, of course. If you follow the current debate now, the development debate with the different development partners, it is come to, it's come to, they've come to acknowledge that we need to involve the diaspora in steering the development of the continent. I already made mention of the role played by the young people in fostering development in the country. You will realize that you and me who have come here and studied here and gained knowledge here, home is home, especially the diaspora who came here when they are old and probably the first generation of the diaspora. We still have so much attachment back home, and every day you're sleeping, you're looking at things, you're imagining, how can I transfer this back home, how can I take this home? And these are the people who are doing this. Talk about the value of remittances that the diaspora are sending to the continent. The World Bank will tell you, for instance, in 2016 or 2017, the value of remittances that the diaspora sent back to the continent was almost higher than the money that we get from Organization for International Development or from the World Bank. Countries like Nigeria have reached a point whereby they even use diaspora remittances as security to secure loans from the World Bank in order to implement big infrastructure. So the diaspora are doing big things. The challenge here is that we have a scattered diaspora. All of us are living here and there, and we have not yet come together. And I think that should be the starting point. People like Sompon Social Services, this is probably the different diaspora organizations need to come together. We need to bring the diaspora together to say, hey, look here, how can we benefit the country? We are privileged to be living in today's world of technology. We cannot continue to be talking about brain drain. We can come together as a diaspora to say, how can we make value of brain gain? I don't have to be in my country to move the continent forward. I can be here and I move the continent forward. We are living in a technological world. So I think the most important thing is to see how to unite the diaspora, and then we move the continent forward.
Thank you so much. You've been so resourceful, and you said that we have to stir development in Africa. That's the diaspora have to stir development in Africa, and we should always know that home is home. And I want to appreciate you equally when you clarify the point about diasporas who come back home. You talked actually of the youthful age who are so flamboyant and will want to carry everything from abroad to bring back home. Thank you so much, Doctor. That is so enlightening. And I hope somebody, when we're talking about diaspora, they talked of able diaspora because there are some diasporas who cannot even impact even themselves before talking about impacting Africa. Thank you so much. And we are equally encouraging all those who are out there to struggle to get used to this, our agenda, so that they can equally impact themselves and why not impact Africa. Thank you so much. In our slots, we always have something about the diaspora because we have noticed that there are some of them who complain too much about Africa. And like somebody said, they do not ask what they have done for Africa, but they keep asking what Africa has done for them. And you rightly say that home is home. So no matter how our Africa is, we are still going to come back to Africa. And so we need to make Africa worth a place to live in. And doctor, you are a political analyst. I come back to that. What are those particular issues, or what word can you say if you were in a position to say something to the African leaders about the spirit of Ubuntu? How do you think this can actually help them? Because we see that there is like people are fighting for their own personal gains. Some people want themselves to be seen in the global arena as the big guns. They don't care much about their people. A word for our leaders who have derailed from the spirit of Ubuntu, because that is our culture, that's our spirit, that is the spirit of Africa. What can you tell the African leaders in a bid to bring them back to the rails so that they can together, I'm talking about all the African leaders, look in the same direction of unity and how they can make Africa a global village? I will insist on this point because it is difficult for you to leave one African country and enter freely in another African country, and we begin to ask ourselves, where are we? In our own Africa, in our own continent, there are such protocols, such diplomatic barriers, and you cannot move freely. How can we make this Ubuntu spirit to become a holistic approach to all the African leaders, a homemade approach that all of them will say, no, our people have to circulate freely, our people have to move around as they want, security, everything being put in order. A word for our African leaders.
Well, there are about 1.3 billion people in the continent. If our leaders can acknowledge that not all the 1.3 billion people in the continent can be rulers, that is for me the starting point. In other words, there are only a few of them who can rule the continent, so there is no need to fight each other. This is my study. There's no need to fight each other. Our leaders should acknowledge that leaders come and go, and the continent is there for all of us to enjoy. So let's build a spirit of reconciliation. Let's build a spirit of togetherness. Let's build a spirit where we acknowledge humanity. Secondly, I would like to tell my word for if I were to meet the presidents of Africa, probably I would tell them that one thing to take home is that the words are running out of my head, but a take home is tomorrow it's you, today it's me. It's not bad to rule a healthy people. What is happening with our leaders now is that it seems like they are working towards impoverishing the people that they are leading, because there is this kind of mentality that it's easy to rule a poor person. It's easy to rule a non-educated person. But I would tell African leaders that it's not difficult. It's not bad to rule an enlightened society. It's not bad to rule rich people, so to say, because in any case, if I'm rich, if I'm well off, then I have no business fighting or competing with you for power. So African leaders invest in human resource and avoid wars. There's no point. Invest, do things, govern in such a way that you invest in human resource that everybody is well off, because then you can harness, you can tax the population. They don't have to fight you. It's the fight for resources that causes all this conflict, as I started my starting point. So if our leaders are going to appreciate humanity and invest in their populations, you can have a peaceful continent. Look at this part of the world. Nobody is fighting to be the next chancellor in. People are only interested in their well-being. So for as long as our leaders are ready to invest in the well-being of their societies, then they can, the moment you ensure the well-being of your society, then you can also be certain that nobody's going to fight for your position, because 1.3 billion Africans are not going to be presidents in 56 countries. We need only 56 presidents for 56 countries. The rest of us just need well-being, and that's it. And that's what they should invest in.
Thank you so much, Doc. Thank you so much. You've been actually a resource person, and we should have invited you already earlier on this platform. We're happy that we have you now, and we will always be contacting you to come up for our programs. You've really thrown much light on this spirit of Ubuntu, and you have just been all around so perfect. Thank you so much. We are rounding up this year, like I said already in my opening statement, 2020 for the program, The Debate. And you will be surprised that it is when we invited some panelists that they were able to know that there is something like Agenda 2063. They have Since then, been working with the agenda, reading about the agenda, and equally motivating and promoting the spirit of the Agenda 2063 within youths, making them to know that something is existing like that, because they are the very beneficiary of this agenda. And we are closing the year, and we are proud and pleased and humbled and honored to have you, Doctor, on our platform. This is the Global Sompon Global TV, and Sompon Social Services has been so powerful behind the promotion of the Agenda 2063. And we are ending the year, like I said. We wish equally already to take this opportunity to thank all those who have been with us on this platform. I thank you, especially Doctor. You're there with me today, closing this program. I am really honored to have you. A word for the Sompon Social Service, who are fighting so hard to popularize this agenda, to make this agenda known to the youths in the villages in Africa, and why not in the diaspora. A word of encouragement, because we are all ears to have a word of encouragement from you to close this year 2020, Doctor.
Well, a job well done to Sompon Global TV and Social Services. Of course, I've worked with them on a couple of occasions. I think that the way forward for this is that why not engage more and more diaspora? Why not engage more and more diaspora? I mean, this is an initiative of one diaspora person, and we can see how it's growing. And I think that if this can incorporate diaspora, more diaspora beyond even Germany, it could be a starting point, because then we learn from each other, we share experiences, and we communicate through different channels. And that means that the message can multiply, the message can be sent to different platforms, to different people, we reach to different people. Secondly, we don't stop here. We don't stop stop within, I mean, by distributing this message, but also I would encourage that let's try to make an initiative to reach out to the African Union. Let's put things together. Let's put our position together as diaspora and reach out to African Union and present to them and say, hey, look here, from the voices of the diaspora, this is what we think. This is what we are doing. I remember that when I was holding discussions with some of the German government representatives on the Marshall Plan with Africa, this is something that I keep on highlighting, to say it's not a good initiative for you to sit in your conference rooms and plan and decide for Africa without involving the diaspora within your own community. We are here. Reach out to us, speak to us, listen to us, seek our opinion. We know the continent better, and we will give you our opinion. Then you decide whether to take it or not. The same thing, I think, for Sompon Social Services is reach out to the African Union. I think they have open voices. Tell them, present your position to them, and we take it on from there.
Thank you so much, Doctor. You say we need to engage more diaspora in this fight to popularize Agenda 2063, communicate equally through different channels to make the message reach out to many people, and that we should equally reach out to the African Union. That is a plan that you already have on the ground, and we are hoping that that is going to materialize. Thank you so much for raising that again. It keeps us always busy to know that we need to reach the African Union to let them know what we are doing. And you see that we need to involve many diasporas so that they equally can work towards popularizing and equally bringing up programs that will benefit us back home. Thank you so much. The program is always 1 hour. Time is always so short. And with all that we have to say, we discover that time always cuts us short. Thank you, Doctor, so much for being there. I wish to thank all those who are participating and watching us live on Facebook as well as on YouTube. We are because you are. This is your platform. This is your space. And we hope that as we are ending the year, this 2020, taking off early 2021, you are going to join us. And we are hoping equally that through you, Doctor, you will get more people to join us so that together we can work towards achieving the different aspirations that are already set forward, and you say, we don't need to end here, we need to work and work and work. Thank you so much, and thank even the technical team that is behind the curtains, making sure that the program goes on so well. I am honored to be ending this year with you, Doctor. So privileged, you have been a resource person, and we are hoping to have you again on our studio, on our platform, as many times as long as you are free and have time to spare to us. We were thinking of having you just 10 minutes, and at the end of the day, we have gone through the program together. Thank you so much. And that is why diaspora is good, because with Africa, we always have problems with internet connections that we are longing that someday we will equally have good connection like you do out there in the diaspora. That is how we had it for this final episode for the debate on the global Sompon Global TV. Thank you, and Happy New Year already in advance. Bye bye.
Bye bye.